Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Emily Aborn. Welcome to the show, Emily. I'm delighted to have you on. How are you today?
Thanks, Desiree. I'm delighted to be here, and I am so fabulous today. So thanks for asking.
I love it. I love to hear when people are doing exceptionally well. You know, we always say like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm doing good," or whatever. But I love that you just jump right in and said you're fabulous. Emily is on the show today to talk a little bit about some really great topics, visibility and what that means versus what it doesn't mean, collaboration in terms of work environment. And I think we can talk a little bit about in a personal way as well. And Emily is the founder of Emily Aborn Consulting. So I just really want to know, first of all, how did that come to be? What was the inspiration behind launching Emily Aborn Consulting?
How do you feel about doing 4-hour podcast episodes? I'm sure everybody says that. All right, so I'm going to give you like the super fast track. So my husband and I opened a retail shop in 2014. And we were in kind of like a little bit of a weird business. We sold non-toxic bedding and home products, mattresses, things like that. So we decided in about 2018 that we were going to shift out of that business just based on like the way the market was going and where we were both at like with our professional and personal journey. So I had to decide what was next. And I worked with a mentor at the time who basically had me list out everything that I loved doing in my current business and everything that I didn't love doing in my current business. And a lot of it came down to like, I don't like being there, but I like doing all the business owner things. So I started doing those business owner things for lots and lots of other people. And, you know, as it happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, it just kind of was like a slow process of learning what I liked, what I didn't like, how I wanted to niche down my business. And one day, I mean, literally, it was just like I woke up one day and I was like, oh my goodness gracious, it has been content and writing. Like that's the common thread since I was 6 years old. I mean, I had like the town newspaper. I was handwriting at age 6. So in that, it was really about like creating content that brings people together, that like creates an interest and engagement, something around the content, not just content for content's sake, but really having like a purpose behind it. So that's the super long story made super short.
Oh, that's cute. I love that you shared about how writing has kind of been a theme for you for your whole life, just even as a child. So that's fantastic. We're not all lucky enough to know that, you know, from an early age that that's something that we enjoy doing. But I love that you shared that. And so then it sounds like you did really make kind of a big transition from, you know, a physical store selling physical products and really switched into more of digital content. And so do you work specifically with other business owners then in helping them create the content that they're sharing, or how does that work exactly?
I write for my clients. I do like done for you, which is like website copy, blogs, social media to some extent, all with like an SEO perspective, if that's their goal, if that's part of their goal. So, you know, really trying to get you to make money while you're sleeping. Like, I believe that leads come to our website when we're resting and they end up in our inbox the next morning. And there you go, with a good SEO strategy in place. So, a lot of it is website copy, blogs, and things like that. But then I also do like done with you, is kind of how I would describe it, where it's like, let's talk through your strategy and what's working and what's not working. And then tons of podcasts and speaking like this, because I love helping to educate people on how to get their message out in like a clear, cohesive way and make that connection with their ideal client, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And just to clarify, because maybe not everybody that's listening understands what SEO stands for. So you want to talk about that for just a second?
Sure. Yeah. So search engine optimization. And I wouldn't let your head spin about it because it's changing every single day anyway. And it's like, when was the best time to SEO your website? 15 years ago. So I'm just we're working on the strategies and best practices for people.
Thank you for elaborating on that a little bit so that those who maybe don't quite know that side of it understand a little bit better. And so then let's talk about what I kind of hinted at the beginning, and that's visibility, what that means and what it doesn't mean. And talk about that a little bit more if you would.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we think of visibility, we think about getting seen, right? Like it's like that billboard on the side of the road, like, look at me, everybody's look at me. And then people will start just running to our businesses and flocking to us. And I like to think of visibility as I do with a lot of things, with content, with marketing, but visibility specifically, it's not just about getting seen. It's also about seeing the other person. So when you are trying to get seen by, let's say, a new audience or connect with a new type of client, it's also about seeing them and speaking directly to what they need, where they're at, how they're feeling.
That's perfect. And so that tells us a little bit about like what it is. And so maybe there's something that says what it's not. And so then do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, just to define it, I think it is anything that you're really doing as a business owner to connect with those new audiences. And really all that I believe it's not is just the me show. And I think a lot of people will make it that where it is just like pushing their agenda or their goal or their business card at you, right? Like you go to those events and how many times have you had the experience where people are just like, you can tell they're just mass handing out their business cards without any kind of interest or curiosity or consideration for who you are, or really any desire to create that true connection. So that's what I want to reframe visibility as is like not just an opportunity to be seen, but also to see other people, to make like where it's basically a bridge between you and them.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And such a good point, I think, because many of us have been at events like that, as you just described, where it's just cards, 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 instead of taking the extra time to understand, what the other person's pain point is, what is their problem, what kind of solution are they looking for or needing that maybe you can help them with. And so I think that that's such a great point. So let's talk a little bit about how you can choose to be visible in a little bit more detail.
Okay, I like to tell stories, so I'll kind of go back to that mattress store time. In that business, it had been going pretty well for the first 3 years. Like we were successful year over year. Like it was everything you could hope for, especially in retail specifically. And we did hit like a little bit of a speed bump in that business. So I reached out to a mentor we have an organization here in New Hampshire called the SBDC. It's the Small Business Development Center, and they provide you with like free consulting and mentorship. So that was kind of like my first dabble into like working with a business consultant. And she sat me down and basically was like, okay, Emily, we were doing all of the things like talk about SEO. We had like a very search engine friendly website. I was writing blogs, I was writing emails. We printed, like, we had like advertisements in all of these local publications. Like, we were doing all the things, right? All the marketing things, posting on social media, all that stuff. When people actually came into our store, we offered them a really, really good customer experience. Like sometimes I even had like coffee, cookies, and like mimosas on Sundays. Like it was a fun mattress store. So she sat me down, like after hearing that, hearing my sob story, and saying, you know what, Emily, like I think you've gotten a little too comfortable in being in your store and just kind of doing the same old, same old. And she's like, I think it's time to think outside the box. So what she basically told me was that I needed to put on like my baby brand new business owner pants and like go out and make friends. And I was like, okay. So I did it. She specifically gave me the instructions of meet people in like-minded industries, chiropractors, acupuncturists, health and wellness specialists, essential oil folks, like people like that. And I just was like, you know what? I'm going to just meet everybody. So I did. I started meeting a ton of people. I had coffee dates with people. I started collaborating with people, like doing podcasts and radio interviews, having people into my shop to host events. Like a mattress store is a great place to host like a solar energy event and like a ladies' night. Like it just turns into so many wonderful things. if you think outside the box. So I did that. I just kind of like kept on going until suddenly one day I looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this huge network of entrepreneurs and people around me, people I can call when I need something, people who I can trust, people who I can bounce ideas and resources off of. So that alone, it didn't like boost our sales like 10,000% in that particular business, but it did send me off on the trajectory for what I was doing next, because I can honestly say that without making those connections that I made way back then, I would not know half of the people that I know right now and have such a great like network around me.
Oh, that's excellent. And it sounds like really that stepping out of your comfort zone and doing those things, meeting all the different people at the meetup sessions or whatever, just the coffee dates you're talking about, and just that collaboration. And I think we're going to talk on that next. And collaboration specifically, really, like you said, just change the whole direction of where you were going, while still offering you some additional business, I'm assuming, for your store at the time. It sounds like. So let's go ahead then and dive into the collaboration aspect of it, since you just touched on that. And tell us, who would you say would be a good person to collaborate with? And is it going to depend on the type of business that you're in or the situation that you're in?
For sure. And sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. And I don't want the introverts listening to be scared. Like, you have to go meet all of these people. You don't. Okay. And you can do it in a really intentional, calm, a way that feels good for your body and your brain. But when it comes to collaborations, I learned my lessons in life going through them and learning the hard way. So I collaborated with a lot of fantastic people. And I also collaborated with a lot of people that probably I would never choose to collaborate with again. What it comes down to, I think, is yes, like an alignment with your businesses. Like you and I, we share a very similar listener, someone who's curious, right? Maybe somebody who owns their own business or is just like looking to learn while they're in their professional job. So we have a good alignment here. Like you cover a lot of the topics I'm fascinated in. I like to talk about topics that your audience is interested in. So that's like alignment. And I think the other one is like making sure that both people are willing to bring to the table their best. So, and I can honestly say, like, it's like the group projects in school. Remember when you were the one that did all the work and everybody else gets the A? It doesn't feel very good, but it also doesn't feel good if somebody else does all the work and they get the A and you know that you did not bring your best to the table. So I think that, a collaboration for me is like 1 + 1 equals greater than 1. Like we can double our impact. We can triple our impact. We can quadruple our impact by coming together and bringing our skill sets and resources and ideas together. I connect with your audience. I share with my audience. So you see how that, like, it helps us basically go further, faster, wider together. So we talked about alignment. I think also the vision of like what you want from the collaboration is really important in some cases, like especially if you're doing an event together with somebody, choosing like, okay, what is actually our vision for this? What is our goal for this? What do we want this to look like? And that can be totally on a different page. And if it is, and if you cannot get on the same page with that person, what your vision is, I think it's a time to step away from the collaboration and say like, you know what, it's not aligned for me, because there's nothing worse than getting in about, 75% and realizing, oh, this is not at all what I want for this. And this is clearly what they want for this. I think that there's some trial and error, right? Like I think sometimes we try things, we believe that they're going to be great and wonderful opportunities, and they don't work out so well. And then I think that sometimes it comes down a little bit to that like gut sense, that intuition, that feeling you get from somebody, talking with them and having open communication. Like, are they able to openly communicate? And really making sure that you're both in this with the effort. So one last thing on collaborating with like putting effort in. When somebody let's say somebody's looking for like more podcast guesting opportunities or speaking opportunities. Like it is such a great way to give back to the person who's bringing you on as a guest by sharing their episode, sharing the speaking opportunity, sharing the event. So it's just like little things like that, that even if it's not your platform per se, there's still ways that you can be a good collaborator.
Yeah, excellent points. Really. And I love the story that you shared about the projects in school, because I think that pretty much everybody who's listening has experienced that at one point or another. Either, they've been the person who's done all the work or have been involved in a group where they could see that there was some people who weren't pulling their weight. So I think for sure everybody can relate to that. And I love that you're talking about sharing things that, how you can support the person that you're collaborating with. If it's not necessarily your target audience or whatever, you can still share that with others, and it may hit somebody who needs to hear it, and you're supporting the person in that way. And I think that's a fantastic idea. I love it. So let's talk about when a collaboration maybe goes awry, and what do you do then? And you did talk a little bit about, maybe you need to pull back. You realize this is not quite the right fit. But what happens if you've pushed ahead anyway and now it's not so good?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm working on a podcast for next week on what happens when you fail. And, failure really, like, I know we don't really love the word, but it really just means like I didn't succeed in what I set out to do. So it's like, it's okay if we just didn't succeed. And it's happened in collaborations where I did not succeed in what I set out to do. So what I do is I have like a little process, right? First of all, I sit back and I feel my feelings. And they're not always comfortable feelings. Sometimes they're feelings of relief, right? There could be just this whole mix of feelings when something doesn't go the way that we thought it was going to go, or it goes awry. First and foremost, you have to get like through it in many cases. But then once it's over, you feel all your feelings around it and let yourself just feel like that full spectrum of whatever it is. Number two, you can congratulate yourself because you tried. And in my opinion, like if you are trying new things, if you are putting yourself out there, you're going to fail. Things are not going to work. So you can congratulate yourself, because most people don't even take that step. They just leave that nice idea on that paper, or like, oh yeah, listen to that podcast, not going to do that, right? So you can congratulate yourself because you did that. Then it's like time to go into assessment mode, like post-mortem, if you will, on the collaboration. What were the internal factors that sort of made this not go so well? Like, where was my energy? I'll give you a great example. I collaborated with somebody over the winter, and I had two of my grandparents pass away, like boom, boom, one after the other. Then I got COVID. Then my husband got COVID. It was just like this whole series of unfortunate events. And during that time, I was trying to plan a collaboration with someone. And I had no business doing that. Like it was a lot of energy, and it was not my best work in so many ways. My point being, that's an internal factor, right? That's something where at the beginning, I could have been like, you know what? I do not have the energy for this. I'm not in the headspace for this. So I can't do this. I can't move forward. So looking at those internal factors, did you even want it in the first place? Like, how often does something go wrong? And it's just because we really actually didn't really want it in the first place. And then it's time to look at those like external things. Like, well, social media hates us all and it doesn't help us promote anything. Maybe the season, like if you try to plan something on Christmas Day in America, chances are it probably will not be well attended. I can speak from personal experience. If you're planning something like at the end of September to like the first 2 weeks of October, people are very busy and they're paying very little attention. So it's like looking at those external things. And then other big things would be like political things, economic things, election times, like things like that are going on totally outside of your control. And you just kind of put it all together. And then you're like, okay, what am I going to do moving forward? Am I going to try this again with someone else? Am I going to try it again with the same person in a different way? Am I going to do this myself? Am I never going to touch this again? So it's sort of like using that whole process, feel your feelings, congratulate yourself, do a postmortem, and then decide how you want to move forward with intention. So anything I think that goes awry, any failure, if you will, we can use that process to help us fail forward, right? Get feedback from the failure and turn it into a win. I cannot even tell you how many failures have become like major wins in my life, propelled me to the next step, helped me to make a decision I may not have otherwise made.
Such great points there. Oh my gosh, I love that. You never know until you try. And then when you do try, if it doesn't work out the way you thought, instead of, considering it a failure, it's a learning lesson, right? How much are you going to be able to pull out of that you can take and carry forward into whatever it is that you do next? It's such a learning experience if we look at it that way. So fantastic. Thank you for sharing all of that as well. And I'm so sorry to hear about your grandparents. That's devastating. And then back to back, and then you're ill and your husband's ill. So I am sorry that that was the experience that you had at that time. So, but thank you for sharing that with us, because those things happen and it is life. And that's going to happen, in our lives as well. We're going to have those things that, come up on us and are totally unexpected. And then how do we deal with it? And that's such a great point that you spoke to also about, maybe I should have just said, I can't do this right now.
You
Let's
know
do it
what?
later.
There's no shame in saying that at any time to anyone. I mean, I think that's where I'm really learning in my business right now is like, if I can't give something a 100% yes, I don't really want to do it. I don't want to be committed to it, because then I'm just dreading it on the day that it comes or not really putting my all into it. So thank you for saying that. And I want us all to kind of like let go of that shame. Like the people pleasing, it works like in the short term. It makes you feel really good to say yes when you first say it. But then in the long term, it almost always hurts way, way more than had you just said no in the first place.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It becomes this thing that you're dreading when it shouldn't be, if you're really, truly excited about the collaboration or the work or whatever it is that you're going to be doing. It should excite you the whole time. And if it doesn't, then it should have been a no. And then maybe how do you get out of it in a way that you don't burn bridges or cut ties? So that's something that I don't know if you want to speak to that, but it's one of those life lessons, is learning when to say, no, I'm afraid it's not going to work for me right now or whatever.
Well, one thing I definitely do want to highlight that you just mentioned, and I hadn't even touched on this before, but excitement is a really good indicator that a collaboration is going to go well. Two people that are real, or whatever, three people that are really, really excited to do something together, and also that particular thing. I think that's a really, really good indication that something is going to go well. I also am a big fan of like respect, like, do we both respect each other? Trust. Can I trust you? And then just like I said, like that delight that you're like, oh, I'm so excited to be doing this with this person. And then as far as burning bridges, I mean, I definitely think that that is a part, sadly, of doing business when you're doing it with your heart, right? Because when you are doing things with your heart, it's almost hard not to make mistakes. It's easy not to make mistakes if all you were doing is running a data-driven business. But I think that as a human being, we use our heart and our brain. And I think that when we do that, it's inevitable that sometimes those things bump into other people's hearts and brains, and it doesn't go how we planned.
That's right on. That's a fabulous point, because we are human. We are dealing with other humans, and we all have our stuff, so to speak. And so that's going to happen sometimes, for sure. Well, you've mentioned a couple of times about podcasting and your podcast. I'd love to have you share with us now, because you actually have two that you have launched. And so tell us about, first of all, what they are, the names of them, and what they're about.
Well, thank you for that. I love both of my podcasts like two separate little children. So the She Built This podcast I launched in 2019. And basically, that is my collaboration. That is a piece of collaboration for me. I get to bring on really great guests, have really great conversations, and it's a win-win-win for them, my listeners, and me. So that's like my collaboration piece. And then I have to like just get cozy, like me and my listener. So I do a show that is specific to marketing, visibility, and content called the Content with Character podcast. And it is just me. So if people don't like me, I would not recommend listening.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, thank you for telling us about the two different ones. And so let's talk a little bit about content with character. And what is that you're talking about specifically on the show?
I think my goal, like I kind of said at the beginning, I don't want people just producing more content for content's sake. There's so much content out there. And a lot of it is generic. A lot of it is not specific. And a lot of it doesn't sound like the actual person that wrote it or is creating it. It's not genuine, right? So I'm really like trying to help people, first of all, do marketing and visibility in a way that feels really good to them. Like, I don't believe that it needs to be this huge thing that you need to loathe and hate in your business. I believe that everybody can find a way to do it in a way that feels really good and maybe even fun. I don't know, just saying. Like, this is very fun. And hypothetically, this is a form of marketing. So there's that. But then I use the phrase distinctly you, because I think that when we are human businesses, you know what? When we are human beings, I think it's important to remember, I know it's very cliche, but you really are 1 in 8 billion. I mean, like, really, like you're the only person with your DNA. You're the only person with your experiences, with your stories, with your unique set of personality traits. Like, there is no other you. There may be people that look like you. People say I look like somebody all the time. I'm like, no, that's the other girl with brown hair and brown eyes. But there is nobody that is you. And so that's really kind of my goal through the show, is really to talk to people about like how to do this all in a way that is distinctly you. Because the truth is, when we are distinctly us, some people don't like us. Some people love us, right? And we want to work with people that are as excited to work with us as we are with them. So that's really the whole crux of the message in a nutshell.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. And I love what you said about everyone truly is unique. We really are. There is no one else like you, like me, like whoever is listening right now. We are completely unique. And remembering that the knowledge that we have, the experiences that we've had are truly special is right on. It absolutely is right on. So I love that you shared that. And, you know, the way that you're trying to talk about marketing, and it's not like in a salesy way. It's really about you're personalizing it. You're trying to reach to the listener or the target audience in a way that helps them solve a need or a problem that they're having or whatever the case may be by that collaboration. Again, here's this person who has this, here's a person who needs that. And how do we make that happen and come together? So I think that's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit now about She Built It. How did that come about? And what are you talking about on the show?
Yeah. So on the She Built This podcast, I talk to women entrepreneurs, and I like to say, and the people in their life who support them. So sometimes I meet a person that's not a woman entrepreneur, and I'm like, I have to have you on my show. It is really a place for me to lean into my own curiosity. And my listeners are like very curious people. They love to learn. They're lifelong learners. And so I like to bring those conversations to the table that give them different perspectives. And we don't really talk about like business strategy and marketing strategy and like how to do things. And you should be doing this. Like, my goal is anything but to overwhelm my listener, because we have a lot of places we can choose to give our time and attention. And I think that what we all want at the end of the day, even in the podcast we choose to listen to, is a connection. I want my listener to feel like when they're listening to me having a conversation with one of my guests, it's like, oh, I'm just sitting here with my two friends, listening to them chat about things. Even if one of my friends is, I don't know, Mel Robbins and the other one is Emily Aborn. So it really is that. And the way I started was I used to interview chamber members about their businesses. So I'd like go around with like my there was like a tape recorder thing on the cell phone that I discovered. And so I would record their interview. And I was like, I have to do something with these interviews because I have all these interviews and I'm doing nothing with them. So I tried like doing a blog about them. And I really, after listening to Serial, I mean, I was like going to be a podcaster 100%. And that was like in 2015. So as soon as I sat down in that chair and did my first podcast on that show, I was like, I am hooked. Like, you will never get me out of here.
I love it. And what a neat way though, interviewing the chamber members. So I mean, like if somebody is listening and thinking like, how do I get started in something like this? Like I'm interested in learning about people or whatever the case may be. Just the memo recording, like you were talking about on your iPhone, just go interview somebody and how you can upload that so easily into a podcast. Wow, that's a great idea. So if anybody wants to take that and run with it, but also that it sort of launched you into this whole realm of podcasting, as you said. And so fantastic. I love hearing the story about how things came to be. So thank you for sharing that with us. And so let's talk a little bit now about connection. Then how are you connecting with your audience, with your network, and how is that coming about?
Okay, let's take it from an audience perspective and then sort of like the people that you meet every day in your business. Because I think that it's going to look different depending on like what your actual personality is as to how you like to connect with people. When it comes to who you're talking to, I don't actually think a lot of people know who they're talking to. I think a lot of people put their message out there and they're like, this is for anybody. And I just read Seth Godin's book, The Purple Cow. It's a super easy read. It's like this big. And he says in his book, and I love this quote and I will not forget it. He always says, the everybody products are already taken, meaning the products that are for everybody, I don't know, Kraft macaroni and cheese, right? Tide detergent, like those products are taken. So now we need to speak specifically to people because people are really invested in brands that they feel a connection to. So how do you create that connection, right? Well, first you need to know who they are. And I mean kind of specifically sometimes. Like I often have this conversation with my clients where I'll give them 2 samples of writing and I'll say, okay, do you want to go in this direction where we're like a little more generalized? Or do you want to go in this direction where we're really painting the picture of how your client is feeling and thinking and interacting with their day? And like 90% of the time, they're like, oh no, I want this specific language. Because it's then when a person goes onto your website or reads your social media post and they say to you, you were in my brain. Oh my God, were you in my brain? You're like, yes, I was. I actually was, in fact. So I think the first thing is knowing like really who you're speaking to and having an in-depth understanding of what they experience and what their struggles are. I don't love, and I think this is just like a personal opinion, but I also think we're kind of moving away from this as a whole in content, it seems. I don't love just like barraging people with their pain. So you're not going to go to my website and see like a list of pain points. You're going to see like a list of ways I can really help you to transform what you're experiencing. And that's kind of like how I like to bring people through the process. Like if I'm going to say something dark to you, I'm definitely going to bring you into transformation right away. So it's not that. It is just speaking to other human beings, recognizing where they're coming from. And I think when we're making those connections, like in one-to-one settings, in networking settings, on the stage when we're speaking, you can do the same thing. Before you and I hit record, I asked you like who specifically listens to your podcast. I like to have a mental picture in my head of who the person is that's listening, maybe what they're doing, maybe they're walking their dog or they're like driving on their way to the office, just so that I can speak like specifically to them. So it's about even when you are in those kind of like broader settings, you can still be making that connection. And then on a one-to-one basis, I think it's like being really, first of all, genuine and also asking questions more than maybe you talk. Now, we're in a little bit of a weird situation, you and me right here, because you said to me, you're going to do most of the talking. But if you and I were in a networking situation and this was literally all I was doing, you'd be like, okay, you haven't asked me a single question, right? So I think it's really that. And like, I like to do little tiny things like If I see a meme or something on Instagram that like reminds me of a certain person, I just send it to them. Someone actually sent me a podcast episode today, which was super fantastic. And I'll share it with you at the end. But she sent me a podcast episode today and was like, hey, I was thinking of you because I think you would like this person. And I did. And it was a great way to make that connection. Like, we're business colleagues. And it was a super simple thing. And like just knowing that she was thinking of me while she was listening to that podcast made a huge impact. Oh, she does listen to me. She does care what I think and what I feel. So it's like those little tiny things. And you can do it for your clients too. It's a great way to create like a client experience when you heard what they like or when their birthday is and you send them that little gift of the socks that they wanted or a birthday card on their birthday or a bottle of wine or something like that. So just making those, like taking the extra step to make those little tiny meaningful moments of connection.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. It is important to remember that we have two ears and one mouth. So we should listen more than we speak and asking questions of the person that you're interacting with, because I think that, you can get so much more. It doesn't have to be one-sided. It's not about just speaking constantly during an interaction. It is important to have some back and forth, but when you're asking questions, you're learning about the other person, and you can absolutely, be more beneficial for them as well, because maybe what they need, what they like, what they're interested in. And so that's fantastic. And I love that you shared about something that came to mind for, a friend of yours who said, I just have to send this to you because I know you're going to love it. And I think that when we do that, that connection becomes deeper. Right?
Yeah, agreed.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned a book earlier, Seth Godin, and I do always love to ask my guests what books that they have found beneficial or influential in their own lives that they'd like to suggest that the listeners take a look at. So besides The Purple Cow, is there another couple of books that you'd like to suggest that the listeners take a look at?
Yeah. So I'll share one business related and one for fun. When I was like 16 years old, I applied for this customer service job and I did not get the job. But they handed me this book called Hug Your Customers by Jack Mitchell. And it changed my life. Like, it changed the way that I viewed customer service and exactly what you and I were just talking about, making those connections with people. So I definitely recommend that. It's still in circulation today. And it's a really, really good book, like for your whole life, but especially for business owners. And just for fun, I just read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, and it was delightful. I don't usually read like the popular reads, but this one I did, and it was truly amazing. Like, she has a very unique writing style and depth of character. It was very, very, very good. And if you don't like to read, it's coming on Apple TV in like 2 weeks.
I did just see that as well, that they're turning it into a show. So that's awesome. And really, not everybody chooses to read that type of book, but why not take a look at it and see if it's something that, you might be surprised. And again, it's like you don't know until you try. But thank you so much for those recommendations. I love it. And I'll include those in the show notes, of course, as well as both of your podcast names, so the listeners can easily find those. And Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I have truly enjoyed our conversation. I think it's just been wonderful. And I appreciate your knowledge and the information that you shared with us today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, Desiree. This was great.
Awesome. Well, lastly, before we go, I would love for you to share with the listeners where they might be able to connect with you if they have more questions about what you're doing, they want to follow your journey. Where would they be able to do that?
Thank you. Thanks for that opportunity. I'll make it very easy. You can find me in all the places at emilyaborn.com. And I am on all social media, but you can find it at the bottom as websites allow.
Perfect. And I'll include that as well in the show notes for easy access. And Emily, again, thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Desiree.
We'll talk more soon.